Have you ever brought up something that hurt you and somehow by the end of the conversation, you were the one apologizing? You started with a real concern, maybe a boundary cross, maybe something was said that didn't sit right with you, but a few minutes later, the whole convo flipped. Now you're defending yourself, now you're comforting them, and now you're questioning whether you should have said anything at all. That doesn't automatically mean that you're dramatic or too sensitive. Sometimes it means the conversation got turned around on you. There's a name for that pattern. It's called DARVO. And once you understand how it works, it becomes a lot easier to recognize when it's happening and not 3 hours later when you're replaying the whole conversation in your head. So let's get into it. DARVO stands for deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. It's a pattern that shows up in relationships, in families, and in high conflict conversations where accountability keeps getting avoided. Here's how it plays out. First, the deny. You bring something up, you say, that comment hurt me, or wait, that was a line that was crossed. And instead of engaging with what you said, the other person denies it. That never happened. You're remembering it wrong. Stop, you're making that up. Sometimes the denial is so confident that you actually start questioning your own memory. Next is the attack. Instead of responding to the issue you brought up, they shift the focus on you. Now the conversation isn't about what happened anymore. It's about your tone. It's about your timing, your past mistakes from, years ago. And suddenly you're defending yourself from 5 different things that weren't even part of the original conversation. Finally, the reverse victim and offender. This is the part that really throws people off. By the end of the conversation, somehow they're the one who's hurt. They're the one who needs your comforting. And you, the person who brought up a legitimate concern from the beginning, are now apologizing or trying to calm them down. But here's the most dangerous part about DARVO and why you keep falling for it. It works by pulling you away from the original issue. You bring up one specific thing, but instead of staying with that moment, they deny it. They attack your character or bring up something completely unrelated. Now your brain has a new job. You're trying to prove what exactly happened. You're trying to explain your intentions, and once you're busy defending yourself, the original concept completely disappears. By the time the reversal happens, you feel so emotionally worn down that apologizing just feels like the easier option instead of continuing the conversation. This isn't happening because you're a pushover. I want to make that very clear. This is a very, very effective psychological manipulation tactic. It's happening because the conversation became incredibly disorienting. When a conversation keeps moving from the target, most people start chasing it. Now, I want to show you exactly how fast this happens. Babe, I felt hurt tonight. It felt like you really weren't being present with me. They deny. I wasn't ignoring you. You're exaggerating. They attack. You're always on your phone anyway. You always act like I'm the problem. They reverse. I can't believe you're attacking me over this. I guess nothing I ever do is enough for you. And before you know it, you're saying, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel that way. Here's another one. With a parent, you say, when I was younger, I felt like I couldn't talk about my emotions without getting shut down. They deny. That's not what happened. You had a great childhood. They attack. You have no idea how much I sacrificed for you, and you only focus on the negative. They reverse. I guess I was just a terrible parent then. I can't believe you'd even say this to me. Now you're comforting them. You're managing their emotions, and your original experience vanishes. Different settings, same 3 moves. Deny, attack, reverse. So, how do you catch it before you end up apologizing? You need to look for these red flags in the middle of the argument. First, if the subject changes incredibly fast, right? You started with one issue and a minute later, you're talking about your tone or something that happened 3 years ago, right? Second thing, you feel confused about the timeline. This is a good one. Third, you feel the urge to comfort them. If you bring up a hurt and suddenly feel responsible for soothing the person you comforted, pause and pay attention. They might not even realizing they're running their own script. But the true part is intention doesn't matter when the result is that your reality keeps getting erased. So what do you actually do when you feel the script flipping? First, name the shift to yourself. You don't have to say, you're doing DARVO, because that usually escalates things. But internally say, we aren't talking about what I brought up anymore. That anchors you. Second, come back to the original point. We can talk about the other issue later. Right now, I'm asking about this specific moment. The goal is not to win the debate, it's to stay connected to the actual issue. Third, my favorite, stop chasing every accusation. You are not required to defend your entire history just to talk about one specific moment. Fourth, know when to pause. I want to talk about this, but if not, if we're attacking each other. Walking away isn't avoiding the issue, it's refusing to participate in a rigged game. After the conversation, my friend, I want you to write down what happened. Not to obsess, but to protect your own memory of events. I want you to trust the timeline, not just the last 5 minutes of the conversation, because you deserve to have concerns raised without losing your grip on reality. And if this helped, please follow along. I talk about making therapy concepts like this so much easier to digest, talk about setting boundaries and protecting your own mental health.